We are recording, and we're recording inside the base camp bunkie here in beautiful Prince Edward County, here with my friend Dave from Strange Brew, here to talk about what we love to do and why we're passionate about things. First of all, we're actually at a brewery called Garage Time, which is a good friend of ours as well. And it was really nice to allow us to bring the bunkie here. It's sort of like a little hangout experiment opportunity to bring a few different people. We've been talking with like an IP agent today. We've been talking to a few different people in the building space. So I thought this would be a really cool opportunity to talk to somebody who is in the business of creating things from different materials and ingredients. And Dave and I are different in terms of what our output is, but we're very similar in terms of the way that we care about the materials that we use and have a relatively interesting process that isn't the norm relative to what we're creating. Right, the type of beer Dave creates beers. But so I've talked a bit. So, tell us about yourself and like who you are and about your business, Dave.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
Dave Frederic, and
yeah, it's okay, buddy.
Yeah, I founded the Strange Brewing Company that I've renamed Strange Brew Studio. I'll get into that in a second. I founded it 8 years ago, and I was a former winemaker for 20 years. So I've brought over a lot of techniques that I use for winemaking, brought them into the beer making. Similar philosophies, specifically kind of trying to find the terroir of beer. So getting back to what Evan was saying, the ingredients that go into the product, super important to try to reflect what's going on, what's being grown in the county specifically. A lot of brewers around the world are using the same grains from the same suppliers worldwide, which is pretty crazy. So that's kind of the opposite end of terroir. So I'm trying to incorporate local products for sure, like local ingredients, and then anything on the property. So, for example, sumac, fruit, juniper berries, honey. One of our buddies, James, he grows mushrooms, so I'm going to be using like lion's mane mushroom, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And then also trying to reach back into the past and keep a continuity of historic beers alive. So some of the beers go back as far as 5,000 years ago. One of them I call it Ninkasi. That's based on the goddess of beer from Sumer. So she would brew the beer, then add in honey and wine. So that's the process I do. And then I also age that in French oak barrels that come from wineries in the area. So it's aged anywhere from 6 months up to 2 years. Nice. So you're incorporating the beer, the honey, and the wine. That is all coming from the county. Right. All of the malts are grown in the county and malted locally in a traditional way. All the hops are grown just up this road. And the water's from on site. I filter it, just a coarse filter, goes through the blue light, but then it's not adulterated in any way. Mm-hmm. So you really get a sense of, as close as possible, we're achieving a product that is coming from the county and represents what can be made from the county. Mm-hmm. And one beer in particular that I call Echoes that's what the real focus is all ingredients are from here. It's barrel aged for minimum 3 years up to 5 years. And it's my homage to terroir in the sense that what you're tasting and seeing and smelling is an echo of all of what the county has in a biological sense, I guess.
Very cool.
And then the spirit that goes into it too.
Mm-hmm. Which is partly your spirit.
Yeah.
It's
the spirit, it's the attitude, it's the philosophy behind it. And, once in a while I may chant to the water before I brew in order to get those molecules all lined up in a happy place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a purity that's there in the product and a clarity. Yeah. So unadulterated, like we don't end up filtering anything or adding anything extra.
Right.
So people do definitely taste the difference. Like they'll come and taste the beers, and they definitely have their own personality and character.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. And that's why I'm a super fan. It is actually unique to find something, and I've loved craft beers. I was just talking to somebody out there. The very first place I got into craft beer was Church Key Brewing, and that was like early 2000s, coming out of like college or something, and we didn't, but started to appreciate the nuance of flavor, and then, you know, long story short, started coming around here more often. Then I came by your place and I tried the beer, and I noticed like such a distinct, specific signature flavor. I actually think some of it has to do with the water personally. It's like, would that be the thing that people think about? Maybe not, but like there's something distinct flavor from your process and from the water in your property. But it was like, we've been talking about simplicity in design today a bit, but we're talking about the complexity, because it's actually really hard to make these things. Like there's the nuance of the skill that you've built over time, learning about how to make wine and then applying that methodology to how you're going to brew beer and then create something that's interesting, but still, I guess, familiar to some case, in some cases to sell, so that people can try something that's completely unique, but still find things that they can enjoy in it. Because if it's wildly unique, then it's fun, but it's not maybe something that people can come back to. Like, oh, I'll try that. But your stuff is so simply complex and great that I've always loved it. So we kind of keep talking and doing things. And when you're talking about your craft, is one of the reasons why I wanted to chat, is because it's just very much the similar way to how I approach what I'm doing. Like I'm trying to use the materials within a certain ecosystem, so that I can't necessarily be just Southern Ontario by nature of some of the materials, but you know, the suppliers that I'm using are all within the GTA, and the materials that I'm using are Canadian based in terms of the woods, you know, that are inside this bunkie here. And it's, as a package overall, looks really simple aesthetically, but there's an insane amount of detail, and that's why I love what you're doing, because I sense that, and I know that about your craft. And that's where you know, the two of us sort of overlap in two completely different fields, right?
Yeah, there are definitely parallels in, like you're saying, the product comes out as clear, clean.
Yeah.
Really, like you could say simple for sure, but the thought behind it and the design process and what leads one to design the product isn't just like, no. It's not a short-term thing. It's something that is complex in its thinking, and then you try to get it down to like first principles, let's say. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, how do you make tomatoes? You have really good soil, and you plant the seed properly and make sure it's watered and not disturbed. And I mean, it's absolute complex situation going on,
right? But
to achieve it is simple, and why mess with it if it wants to do it on its own in a way? Yep. Like for your structure to come, like you're following the traditions and building things for centuries, but you're bringing a new spin to it, mm-hmm. and you're making it your own. Yeah. But yeah, it's all that design work that goes in the back end, and it shows up just in a nice, clean, organized.
It's almost like it was effortless, but it's only 20 years in the making. Right. Yeah. Right. It's just, but that's why it's interesting. Like every time you say a new thing, I want to I know what you mean in terms of that specific detail and how you brought all those different things together. And that's why I love it. And, you know, I think it's really fascinating, the journey that, you know, people like you and I go through who are passionate about a product. I don't know, I'll speak for myself, but it's never really been about, you know, how can I make the most and where's my things that I get at the end of this process. It's really been like, what is the meaning behind this, and why am I going about doing this, and how can I help people? And, you know, like, oh, these are wealthy people. Well, sure, to some extent, and, you know, beers are expensive too, like, but it's still about creating something that is not the norm. And the people who seek it out, you know, they don't always have to be wealthy. It could be people that are just willing to pay the premium for something that has that thought that they care about. And that's always this weird if the word is moniker or this like stigma that, oh, if you're this, that, or the other in terms of their price, then like you don't care about that stuff. But it's the unfortunate nature of cost of things now, and also, you know, to be able to get some of these materials that are not commodified, that are not from the same grain company. Like I get my plywood from a special manufacturer in BC. This stuff on the inside, like I could get it from Asia, I could get it from Europe, I could get it from wherever cheaper, but this is the one that has what I want. And now people recognize my product based off the back of the efforts of this company and the effort that they take to get this grain and repeat that product, which is also important, right? So as much as we are craftsmen, it's really good that we have some mainstays that we can rely on too, because anybody who's building a product has to rely on some kind of a supply chain. It just doesn't have to be the mega one, right?
Yeah, one of the most crucial one for myself is there's like I said, the grains are grown in the county, but there's only one malter, Devon. He has a
his name. It's not a company, it's a guy.
Well, his name's Devon.
Yeah.
He has a Barnawa malt, which is just north of Belleville, and like I said, traditionally malted. If he didn't have his business, I would have no source for county grain that's malted locally. Like he's the one guy.
Yeah.
It's so a lot of what like the supply chain can be thin at very it's like just to think that he wasn't around, like what am I going to do?
But that's how it used to be, right? People would rely on one another, and then when that got disrupted, sometimes those businesses ceased to exist. Yeah. Where we try to foolproof our businesses and create some kind of a middle ground based on a variety of potential alternate sources in case something goes down. Which, you spend a life's work trying to get something figured out and to make a living off of it, as opposed to punching a clock. Nothing wrong with that one way or another, but to be entrepreneurial and create a thing from scratch through process, and then have such a tiny little, element be removed and have the whole thing come down is a challenge. So I understand and respect that too, but that's part of the struggle of a craftsman, of somebody who's passionate about their product. And like the metal guy who makes this, he is a one of a kind. I don't know who else could make it to this level of perfection. That's CR Systems. That's Carl, and he's an amazing freaking guy, and I really appreciate it. So it's very similar. I don't know who I would get to replace him. It's okay, Carl. We're good, right? But it's definitely it's noticeable when you lean on other craftsmen, how that it amplifies your ability, like those products that then make the whole. So, but I mean, talking about all this stuff, I'm really curious about like, how did you decide to make the leap from being like a winemaker in Okanagan Valley to then taking up residence in Prince Edward County and then becoming a brewer? Like there was a scene here, much smaller than it is now, but what brought you here? Was it the scene, or was it just family, or what made you go to beer?
Well, I was in the Okanagan for quite a long time, and then but originally from Ontario.
Oh, okay.
So I did want to settle down, and I felt like Ontario was calling me for some reason. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was still, a winemaker. So I decided I checked out all the regions, and the county just seemed to be the best vibe for me. This is what it's bucolic. It's like when I think that I live in the countryside, the county is the place where I get that feeling. Mm-hmm. You have some small villages, a larger town, but all the places in between, it's just very calm and quiet. And the community here is pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. Lots of great people. Where Niagara is a bit too fast-paced for me. The wineries are like, the whole place is sort of larger scale facilities. And I had always worked for small, like independent family-run wineries, which I love the intimacy of it. I love the hands-on. Mm-hmm. You're not just working in a lab or just working on the crush pad. You're doing a lot of the work. Yes. A lot of the vineyard work and stuff. So then I got to the county, was winemaking here, and then started drinking beers from Quebec, and was stunned that I never had beers like that before. Yeah. And I was like, oh, beer's barrel aged? Like I had very little knowledge about beer, and something like there was a spark and it just ignited. Mm-hmm. And it opened my eyes to think, wow, if I started my own little brewery, then I can still do barrel aging, which I love doing. And there's the window's open to do more creative things with beer making than with wine.
Mm-hmm.
Wine, you can be creative, but you're limited to the grapes that you're growing in the ground and the region that you're in, for sure.
Right.
So
I accept your answer. Yeah, so it's a lot of the vibe here. And so I really love L'Île d'Orléans, which is that little island right south of Quebec City. And that's where we used to go to the microbrasseries. And there's a lot of really interesting breweries there. That place, it reminds me very much of Prince Edward County. It's isolated by water, not completely isolated as an island. There's easy ways to get back and forth by bridge, but it's very similar. Got the farms, the fromageries. It's got like, there's a very similar vibe here to there. So I could see like all of a sudden if you had some like traditional Quebec beers and some of the different things that they're doing there, that would totally spark. Because I found that and I loved it too. And but that's why I love it here. I don't live in here, which would be cool, but just close enough that I get to come in and visit you often enough and enjoy it. But I get that vibe here. Yeah, this vibe is unique, and it's been changing a bit. Guys like me, I'm not coming in here, but more people coming from GTA. But I think it's held up pretty well from an outsider's perspective, in terms of maintaining that integrity. So, I mean, that does answer some of my other questions about what it's like to call Prince Edward County your home, and how you've been really digging into the community. I guess the next question is, when are we getting some Bunkies on your property?
as soon as possible. As soon as financially feasible.
Yeah. Oh, that's not a catch yet. Well, because we've always talked about that, and a big part of.
Well, we can do a party next year too.
Yeah. You have some remodeling to do, right?
Some remodeling and I have some music festivals, so it'd be great to incorporate you with that.
Yeah.
Have one there, and people can really check it out.
Yeah.
You can hang out all night and enjoy the music.
I get to sleep over in a bunkie for the first time ever, which now is disclosed worldwide. I didn't really want to do it in the parking lot here, but we'll do that next season. But it's always a pleasure just coming and hanging out and appreciating the craft. And, our conversations was the ethos of even bringing this bunkie here. And it was too bad about what happened. And you'll get that figured out, and we'll be back next year, and we'll do some fun stuff, and maybe the new models and everything be ready to go. But I think people are really interested in just understanding what craft is. It's not one particular thing. It's really, I think it's a passion-based thing, and I think it's an experience-based thing. And I think we're really, I don't know where we're at in terms of this cycle, but we were lucky in our generation to have a lot of like the practical hands-on experience in a lot of these businesses moving and happening, and things economically viable and changing, that we were able to build this experience to then become entrepreneurs to do the craft. Because we would not have been able to create what we have now without those experiences working for people or doing that. So I've been really nostalgic lately, thinking a lot about the process as opposed to the end goal. And I'm like, I miss it. I miss it. I'm already missing some of the milestones and things that we've been doing. And it's an interesting way to live. And I think about that whenever we hang out, and I always appreciate it. So thanks so much, man, for coming, and we'll see you next year, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Take care, man.